Do you know what governments love to say? We're working for your financial freedom, stability, growth, opportunity, economy. Sounds great, doesn't it? But if you take even a quick look at history, the picture tells a very different story. In reality, governments have been playing the same game for centuries. Their goal has always been the same: to keep ordinary people in debt and make the powerful even richer. And here's the ironic part: these policies aren't new. They just change shape over time. The same game, just in new packaging. Old tricks dressed in modern names. And always with the same goal: move the money upward, keep the people dependent. Let's start with the oldest trick of all: inflation. When a government spends more than it collects in taxes, it has two options. It can be honest and raise taxes, which is political suicide, or it can quietly debase the money. And that right there is the oldest financial trick in history. Ancient Rome perfected it. In the 3rd century AD, emperors were constantly at war and needed funds for their armies. There wasn't enough money, so they found a solution: lighten the coins. The denarius, once nearly pure silver, started losing its real silver content. Over time, it became mostly copper, with just a thin silver coating on top. The empire pretended nothing had changed, but people noticed. Prices went up, wages stagnated, and savings evaporated. The emperors were quietly collecting the most silent tax of all: inflation. And here's the funny thing: the same trick is still used today. Only now it's done by central banks. Let's jump to the Middle Ages. The plan changed, but the logic stayed the same. Kings were always at war, and they always needed money. In England, France, and Spain, rulers asked wealthy merchants to lend money for the good of the nation. But that request was actually an order. Say no, and your property was seized. You were fined, or worse, imprisoned. They called it a forced loan. In other words, the government said, "Lend us your money, we'll pay it back later." But repayment either never came, or it came in worthless currency. Kings kept their wars going while draining the wealth of their people. The trick was pressure disguised as patriotism. And it worked for centuries. By the late 1600s, the whole system had turned into a financial game. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded. Why? Because England was at war with France and desperately needed money. Rich merchants lent money to the crown and in return were promised interest. But who paid that interest? Ordinary people, through taxes on salt, beer, and cloth. The rich lent money to the government and earned interest, while the poor paid those taxes. It was a system that transferred wealth upward. And believe it or not, it still works the same way today. Ask anyone, what's the safest investment? And they'll say, government bonds. Sure, but who pays the interest on those bonds? We do. Now let's move to the modern world. The tricks are still the same, only the names have changed. Governments run massive deficits every year, piling up debt. Politicians tell us, this money is for roads, schools, and social programs. But in reality, much of it goes to giant corporations, defense contractors, and banks. And who pays back the debt? We do, through higher taxes, weaker money, and cuts to public services. The debt is for the people, but the burden lands on the people while profits go to bondholders. Remember the 2008 financial crisis? Banks took insane risks, the housing bubble burst, and the system collapsed. And what happened next? Governments stepped in and bailed the banks out. Trillions of dollars in taxpayer money were poured in to save the system. But who got saved? Us? The banks did. They emerged stronger, while ordinary people were left deeper in debt. The name of that game: privatize the profits, socialize the losses. And the cruel irony: the public was told, you don't want the system to collapse. But the truth was, the system was already collapsing on their backs. Now let's talk about the pension system. People work for decades, contributing a portion of their salary to a government-run retirement fund. They trust that money will be there when they retire. But governments don't actually save that money, they spend it. What's left behind? A piece of paper that says, "I owe you." In other words, the pensions of today's retirees are paid with the taxes of younger generations. It's basically a government-backed Ponzi scheme. It works until demographics shift, populations age, and the balance breaks. Then comes the so-called reform. Benefits are cut, retirement age is raised, and inflation quietly eats away the rest. And while all this happens, the names change, but the game doesn't. Inflation becomes growth, forced loans become duty, pension cuts become reform, and bailouts become stability. Words hide reality. The result center stays the same. Wealth flows up, burdens flow down, and the system keeps working because most people forget history. They don't understand how financial systems work. They think inflation is natural, taxes are inevitable, and governments are on their side. But history shows the same pattern again and again. In Rome, citizens lost their savings through debased coins. In the Middle Ages, kings robbed merchants through forced loans. In the modern age, governments borrow endlessly and send us the bill. Different centuries, same mechanism. By the 21st century, the tricks didn't disappear. They just got more complex. After the 2008 crisis came something called quantitative easing. Sounds technical, right? In reality, central banks printed trillions of dollars and bought bonds to stimulate the economy. Yes, markets recovered, but who benefited? The wealthy investors, because stocks, real estate and bonds skyrocketed. And the rest of us? We got hit with inflation and rising living costs. The system saved itself, but not us. Now let's talk about hidden taxes. Sometimes governments don't raise income taxes directly. Instead, they tax you through higher prices, sales taxes, fuel duties, rising costs. But the biggest hidden tax of all is inflation. Prices rise, wages can't keep up. Government debt shrinks in real value, but your purchasing power disappears. People don't see it as a tax, but that's exactly what it is. A silent robbery. Another trick, regulations disguised as protection. Laws and regulations are supposed to protect the public. But in reality, big corporations often shape them for their own benefit. In the 19th century, it was the railroads. In the 20th, the oil giants. Today, it's tech and finance. Governments say, we're protecting the people. But in truth, those protections make the big players even richer. The public feels protected while the system quietly strengthens itself. Then comes the war economy. During World War I and II, governments told citizens to buy war bonds. People did so proudly, believing they were helping their nations. But those bonds became risk-free profits for the wealthy, and the debts were repaid through taxes by ordinary people. In the 21st century, the same story played out in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trillions in debt, profits to corporations, and the bill handed to the public. The wars ended. The debt didn't. And finally, the last trick. Complexity itself. The system today is so complicated that almost no one fully understands it. Tax codes span thousands of pages. Financial instruments are incomprehensible. Budgets are filled with vague numbers and hidden lines. That confusion isn't an accident, it's a shield. If people don't understand it, they can't question it. If they don't question it, they won't resist. And so the transfer of wealth continues quietly. In ancient Rome, people could literally see their coins losing silver. Today, that loss of silver hides in spreadsheets and financial reports. But the result is the same. Value shifts hands, unnoticed. So why talk about it now? Because these tricks are still happening, and faster than ever. Inflation eats your savings. Debt piles higher each year. When markets wobble, bailouts return, and you work harder for less real wealth. The system is built to protect itself, not you. History keeps repeating the same lesson. In Rome, citizens suffered as their money lost value. In the Middle Ages, merchants went broke from forced loans. Today we repeat the same mistake, blindly, because most people don't even know the game is being played. An uninformed public cannot defend itself. That's why financial education is a form of resistance. Economic history is a weapon. If you understand the tricks, you're much harder to deceive. So never forget this. When the government announces a stimulus package, ask who profits first. When inflation rises, remember it's not bad luck, it's policy. When you hear about new regulations, ask who wrote them and who benefits. And most importantly, never blindly believe the system works for you. The system protects itself. History doesn't repeat exactly, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. The tricks that kept Roman citizens poor are the same ones draining your account today. The only difference is whether you recognize them in time. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Because history already gave us the answers, I'm just here to show you where to look.